This is the Madonna and Child, and it really did start from a Leonardo da Vinci drawing, and then that was kind of the pose that I took, and then I just pushed it in my own direction. It's I'm just going through the different layers. So when I start with the sculpture, I start either with the saw or a hammer and chisel. So so it's a little bit rougher, and you just go through and make. So that's the traditional method. You just find the form with the point chisel, and then you go through with the gradina and the different tooth chisels until you get finer and finer. So from that, I go to the rough tooth chisel, and then I just get into the...
The first interview is done. I'm actually in the car because it's so cold outside and it's raining. So I prefer to get in the car to do the video. The first interview was difficult because he was working and I didn't want to disturb him. So it was complicated to question him about his work. We will do the second interview, and I hope it will interesting like the first, and I hope to learn more about Alex.
When I moved from America to here, I knew I needed to try something different and just try to make something happen, because in New York there's a million artists and it's impossible to get recognition. But I always wanted to work in marble, and even before I went to the school, I knew I wanted to work in marble, but there's nowhere in America that teaches marble. So I decided it was best to learn sculpture in general, learn the figure, and then figure out the marble. So I got my undergraduate, and then I tried to teach myself marble, and it only sort of worked in America. I tried to teach myself for 2 or 3 years, but it wasn't until I came here that you learn all the little tricks to make things, to make it much easier, much better. See the block. After you've worked on marble for long enough, you can kind of start to see inside it and see what is there, what you have to work with. And so that was the hardest part, getting to that point where I could really see inside the block. And now that's the best part, the beginning. You cut into the block and take off big chunks right away, and it's really exciting. So now the hardest part for me in a sculpture is the finishing. It's now that it's so easy to just reproduce something with a robo. Sculpture is kind of becoming something different, and I love the process of working in marble, and I think the artist's hand is what's most important. And so the sculpture really develops over the months that you work on it, and it takes on a life of its own that you can't predict ahead of time. So so I think that's important to work on the piece and develop it, and then I do leave it non finito, just unfinished. Well, it was difficult to figure out the process of how to move over here, getting the visa and finding an apartment and enrolling in school. It was all very difficult when you don't know the language and you don't know the system and the bureaucracy. But but I was really determined. I really wanted to make it happen. And so I just kept pushing through, and I think if I didn't have such a goal, I never would have gone through all that hassle. It was difficult. I always know what I'm doing going into it because I'm either doing a male figure or a female figure. It's pretty simple that way, but then you get into the details, and it is complicated. With an abstract, if it's a really good abstract piece, it can be just as complicated because, if something's just a little bit off, you can tell. It gives a completely different feeling to it. So I just love the process of working. So sometimes I don't know what I'm doing when I start into a block of marble. I just start working, and I find the inspiration within the stone, just the process of working. Sometimes I'm just cutting and listening to podcasts or music, and thinking about whatever those podcasts are talking about. But then a lot of the time I have to turn those off and just be in my own head and thinking about the sculpture, and I don't know, my mind starts to wander, and I think about the aesthetics of the sculpture and then what the sculpture is all about, and that's when the sculpture really comes alive.